Welcome to Love and Lattes, the podcast designed for women who are ready to stop settling and start living a life full of authentic love, confidence, and real connection. I'm your host, Victoria, the self-love scientist, speaker, and coach, and I'm here to help you reclaim your power, deepen your relationships, and fall unapologetically in love with yourself. So grab your tea, your latte, or your favorite beverage, and let's get started. Is your nervous system hijacking your ability to feel loved and safe in relationships? Well, babes, in today's episode of Love and Lattes, I, Victoria Eisenhower, am joined by Brinn Langdale, who is a licensed therapist, holistic coach, speaker, and soon-to-be published author. And we're going to unpack why healing goes deeper than your mindset and how understanding your astrological traits and emotional wiring can open the door to lasting connection. Welcome, Brinn. Welcome to Love and Lattes.
Oh, thank you, Victoria, so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Amazing. I'm very grateful that we connected a couple weeks ago and you shared your story and like how you've created this holistic approach when it comes to navigating your inner child and how that's connected to different inner parts and then how that impacts your relationship. And I was like, oh, we have an episode.
So much to talk about.
So everybody grab your pens and pencils because these are honestly, some of these words are very hot right now, you know? So I kind of want us to start a little bit with who is this inner child? Who, like when people hear inner child, they're like, what?
Yeah. And like you said, it's kind of a buzzword right now. So I think it's this term that gets thrown around. And I think people are like, oh, that's so cute. Or like, oh, when I want to go like run through the sprinklers, it's my inner child, right? They kind of associate it with that. And I'm here to say your inner child is a representation of all of the wounded parts of you. And so oftentimes this can get either a really bad rap or get really misunderstood. And so if you think about it, we all have things from our childhood that affected us, right? Like nobody had perfect parents, nobody had perfect relationships with, siblings or cousins or whatever it was. We all had issues in some way, shape, or form, and that caused a wound of sorts. And so this inner child kind of represents those wounds. So for example, I might have a 4-year-old inner child, but I also have maybe a 12-year-old or like a 16-year-old. And because we grow and we shift and we change. And so understanding that these are really versions of ourselves that had, that really hold on to these negative beliefs about ourselves. So fast forward into adulthood, we're trying to like get things done and move forward and doing all this, but really we need to kind of go back and look at how those younger parts of ourselves can be really like limiting and hold us back, gain compassion around them, and start shifting our relationship to these parts so we can move forward in our adulthood.
Oh, wow. That was a lot more than even I like personally thought of because at first I was like, yeah, there's usually one. No, there's multiple versions. And that is really fascinating. Is there a way to know, like, okay, maybe this might be a very weird question, but is there a way to know, like, obviously you're carrying a wound? Like, for an example, let's say the first kind of part of inner child, I thought it was maybe my younger, like middle school specific age range self who, I don't know, oh my gosh, probably was battling, body growth, obviously like developing a lot later. So probably had to like guard herself or something. Like, how do you know which version of inner child to like work with?
Yeah. So say, for example, here you are today and you look at a picture of yourself and you're just like, oh man, that's not looking so great. Like, oh, look at my stomach or look at my chest or look at my hair, right? And you start to kind of pick yourself apart. One, that could be your inner critic. That's your inner critic talking, but your inner critic might be saying the words like, oh, look at that, stomach. I can't believe you're, even taking this picture right now. Don't you dare think about posting that on social media, right? That's a very critical voice. But who is the critic talking to? That critic is talking to that wounded part of yourself that's still in seventh grade. And that one is the one saying, oh my gosh, I can't post this. This is terrible. Like, what are my friends gonna think? I don't look nearly as good as my friend does in this picture. I should just cut me out of the picture and like post it of her because she's beautiful.
Mm.
Right? And so here you are, present day, this like fully capable adult who like probably feels pretty good about herself on most days, but there are those times where we get triggered and that brings up that old wound. It's kind of like if you have a physical wound and you start poking your physical wound, it's gonna hurt, right? And so if that hasn't been healed and properly treated, then it's going to continue to hurt. But if you take the time to recognize, oh, there's a sore spot here. There's a wound. I need to like address this. And you can kind of go back and say like, oh, I don't know if you had like a Vicky or a Tori state, like if that was a thing or if it was always Victoria, but like addressing your little kid by that name and being like, oh, honey, like you were having some hard times during that time, and I'm here to let you know that you are okay just the way you are. And it's not your job to look perfect. In fact, nobody really looks perfect, but I'm here with you and I will love you through this hard time right now.
Mm. I love this. And you mentioned another word that I myself I've definitely learned about, and then I've also spoken with clients about the inner critic. And I feel
Yes.
that is a very big driver, especially when it comes to creating these triggers or reactions and inner feelings. How would you best describe the inner critic? Like, where does it come from? And is it the same thing as the ego, or is it somebody, is it, and I say somebody like in quotes, because it's, you literally hear it. Like it's someone talking back to you, and you're like you said, you're like, don't post that. Like you're like for women, like right now I have my hands on my lower belly and it's like your pooch is sticking out. And it's like, actually, it's beautiful. Thank you. However, there's a lot of women out there who are like, oh no, I don't want to wear this because it shows my belly or my arm flab, stuff like that, or stuff like that. So yeah, just to kind of go back to that question, like, what is the inner critic and is it the same thing as the ego?
Yeah, great question. So, in general, I do think of us having these different parts. Like if you've seen the movie Inside Out, right? The Inside Out shows the different parts in the brain and like each part takes over the control panel. So the critic might be taking over that control panel of like, hey, don't post this. You should work out more. You should do more push-ups or sit-ups and that pooch will go away. And but then we have the little inner child that's feeling hurt by those comments. And then we have our adult self. And that adult self can look at that picture and be like, okay, sure, I have a pooch. And I'm also really okay with that. And yeah, maybe I do want to exercise because I think exercise is healthy for me, but I'm not going to do it from a shame based place that the critic is suggesting, right? I'm going to work out because I think it's healthy for me and I feel good when I exercise, not because I'm punishing myself for the way my body looks. So, how would I describe the inner critic? I describe it as this harsh, critical voice that is honestly, when we narrow it down, we kind of drill down and kind of get to the bottom and root of like why the critic exists, it's there to protect us. And this is sometimes like a controversial topic because people are like, oh, silence the inner critic, get rid of the inner critic. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We actually need this part because it's the part that's going to keep you from like walking out in front of a bus, right? It's the part that's going to keep you safe because it thinks, oh, if you have a pooch, nobody's going to like you. Or if you have a pooch, you're not going to be attractive. And so therefore, you're not going to find a partner. And if you're not going to find a partner, then you're not going to have babies. And if you don't have babies, you're never going to be happy, right? The critic has all of these stories that are going on in its head. And whether or not they line up with your values of your adult self right here, right now, are probably two different things. So your critic is not the same as the ego. So they're kind of two, yes and no. Yes and no. And either way, I don't think we need to get rid of the ego. This whole idea of like death to the ego and all of that, No, we need a healthy ego because it makes us confident. It makes us feel capable. It makes us be like, oh, yeah, I did that thing and I'm proud of it.
Mm.
We need that energy, especially women. Especially women. Like, we're kind of raised in a society where people are like, today, they're like, oh, love yourself. You just gotta like love yourself. But if you actually are like, oh, wow, I did that thing and it's really cool. If you're proud of your accomplishments, then it's like, oh, but don't be too proud because then you're seen as arrogant. Or if you think you look really good, now you're seen as like vain or worse, right? And so you can get really demonized. And as children, it can be like, oh, you need to be taken down a peg or two. Or like, don't get too big for your britches, right? Or like, you might, if you're feeling really good about yourself, you might be seen as like a troublemaker, right? So, like, there's all these ways that our society has really kept us down and enforced this critic energy of like, I need to be self deprecating. I need to be saying that everybody else is better than me, or else I will get outcasted. And so, on some level, we need those parts to recognize the truth of who we are. And the truth of who we are is that we are wonderful, beautiful, you know, in my opinion, totally perfect spiritual beings who are, walking around having this spiritual experience. And we're all learning and we all make mistakes and we're all growing and everything's gonna be okay at the end of the day. And to a lot of our parts, they don't know that. So we kind of need the healthy ego, or what I call the adult. I think the ego is kind of a split between the critic and the adult, in my personal opinion. But those are two different schools of thoughts. So it's kind of like it's hard to compare because I see both traits in the adult and in the critic that come from the ego.
This is so cool. Like I love learning about these different parts of us. And now that I think about it, you mentioned a word earlier, like protecting. And when it comes to the inner critic, when you hear like it's, what it's saying to you or its suggestions, isn't it kind of using what it knows to protect us? Because like that's just from like previous experiences. Like, no, don't post that because, no one's gonna like it, or don't send that message, you're talking too much because it's something that we've experienced. Would you say like that's where it's coming from?
Yeah, it's something that you've either experienced yourself or you've witnessed other people experience. So
Mm.
if you yourself have ever judged somebody for posting a picture, that's also coming back on yourself, right? So, like, if you've ever judged somebody else for talking too much, then you're going to judge yourself for talking too much.
Interesting.
So, yeah, the critic is like, right, not partial to like us or anybody else. It's kind of like we're going to we're going to be judgmental all around. And so one thing I know for me is when my inner critic is really loud about somebody else, that is a really good indication that I need to look at where my critic is being loud to me. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, but it's like when you point the finger at somebody, you got three fingers pointing back at you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same thing with our inner critic. Our inner critic will often lash out at somebody else. That's a really good red flag to be like, okay, pause. I need to look at what's going on inside me that's making me feel judgmental of this other person.
Okay. I think that's a really great reminder. I'll be honest with you. I can't think of a time where I thought of like judging someone right now. I'm always all about like, wow, that's real. I've learned to kind of switch my mindset where I want the best for everybody. Um, there might be something like, I would not share that. But when I think about the inner child and this inner critic and these different parts, how does having all these in a way either healed or like how do these show up in our relationships and like having these parts maybe in a way dysregulated, like if we don't heal, like I guess I have so many questions, so pull it. But
Love
basically,
it, love it. We got time.
right? Like if you think about it, if for me, I always feel like that there's no end to the journey. Like I myself am always learning about parts, and just learning, there was at one point I'm in like a very healthy relationship, and at one point I was like, no, I'm not gonna send all this. It's too much. And then he asked me, he's like, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, well, because there was a time. Let me go investigate this some more. And I'm unhealed here. And when I think about it, the inner child and these inner parts and whatnot, how does how do these, basically impact our relationships? Is it like it does have an impact on our choices? It kind of impacts, you use the word shame. Like I know a long time ago that came up for me a lot. So can you kind of dive a little bit about how having nurturing these parts can create a more healthy relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you a little bit about my personal experience. So I experienced a lot of childhood trauma growing up, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of people listening to this who also experienced a lot of childhood trauma. I dealt with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse inside my home. And that caused a lot of these parts to really try to protect me, right? In their way. And how their way of protecting me was keeping me small, not saying anything because I had learned not to use my voice. I had learned to not speak up. I had learned to hate myself and internalize all of what I was experiencing. And instead of getting mad at the people who were hurting me, I got mad at myself. So it caused a lot of anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders, suicidal ideation, all sorts of stuff. And those are all basically ways of trying to protect you. And I know it seems kind of counterintuitive, but that's the body's way of trying to keep you in survival mode. And so I lived a really long time in survival mode, and the biggest thing that it was impacting me that I noticed was my relationships, my romantic relationships, my friendships. And when I was in college, I had a long-term boyfriend, and I think it was definitely the healthiest relationship I had had to date or back then. And he's a great guy, and I would get blackout drunk. That was one of the ways that, I was coping and dealing and trying to escape what I had experienced when I was in childhood. And it kind of got to a point where he was like, "Hey, this has to stop or else I'm out of here." And so that's what got me to do the deeper work. But I also had I had best friends who were telling me that they were mad at me. I didn't have great relationships with my family. So I was really seeing the relationships in my life as a mirror for me. I was like, okay, there's a common denominator here. And I realized that that common denominator was me. And that's really what motivated me to start to get help. And so at 22 years old, that's when I enrolled in a program where I learned all about my inner child and my inner critic and my adult self. And it was like somebody turned the light bulb on. All of a sudden, everything I did made absolute perfect sense through the lens of understanding trauma, understanding brain development, understanding the nervous system, understanding these parts of ourselves. Everything made sense. So when I bottled up my feelings and exploded in a, fit, or, it was basically throwing a temper tantrum, it was because as a child, I bottled up everything because nobody knew what was going on with me. I held on all these secrets. I had all this shame, all this stuff, and then it would all come out in a fiery volcanic rage. And then we throw astrology into the mix. You mentioned astrology earlier. That's like a huge thing for me. I'm a huge advocate of astrology. I've been studying it for 10 years. I learned that I have a fire moon in a fire house. So what that means, if you're not familiar with astrology, one of your main signs is your moon sign, and it's where we go when we get triggered. And it's how we respond, how we kind of self-soothe, how these subconscious beliefs that we hold on to. And when I found out that I had a fire moon in a firehouse, I was like, oh my gosh, all of the rage, all of the anger, everything all of a sudden made absolute perfect sense when I looked at it through that lens also. So, what that brought to me was a lot of compassion for myself. I walked around thinking I was crazy all the time. I was like, I'm crazy, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. But when I started looking at why this was happening and what my inner child was trying to tell me, and my inner child was just trying to get her needs met, she was trying to get heard, but she had learned that she couldn't be heard for a really long time. And then my critic would get mad at me if I would try to get heard, like you were saying with don't send the long text message. And so my adult had no skills, right? My adult had no communication skills, had never taken a communication class before, had never read a communication book before, right? So it was during those years I spent, my entire 20s dedicated to my healing journey. And it was through all of that navigation, whether it was yoga or meditation or breath work or, the parts work or astrology, everything was just getting clearer and clearer and clearer of there's nothing wrong with me. I make absolute perfect sense. And I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, what I'd been taught by my family and by society and by culture and by the trauma that I had experienced. And so that brought a lot of acceptance and compassion. And then I was able to start, then the self love came, right? Then I was able to say, oh, honey, I love you. I get you. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. And that's when I could start actually cultivating real self-love. And and that for me, total game changer in the way I see myself and in the way that I see everybody else too.
I think that's a very powerful way of starting and like starting that journey. And thank you for sharing that, by the way, about your history, because I think it can be very it doesn't seem realistic to be like, yeah, let me just love myself more, go get my nails done, which not gonna lie, love it. But I also, you know, I could do that, but in the back of my mind, I could feel so unworthy of it. And like I don't feel good about it. I feel like, oh, this is, you could hear that inner critic, like, what a waste of time. Like, why would you get your nails done? Like, just all the nasty things. But I'm really glad that giving yourself the compassion first and understanding, you said it really, really well that, you did nothing wrong. You were just moving throughout life based on, shaped by the experiences you had. And that created this communication between your inner child, your inner critic, and you're like, this is normal. Like, but that's my normal. And then no, just taking, I think that's an amazing moment to take note of like, wow, these relationships are a little jarring and I want them to work. So that must have been a really big, when you said the common denominator was you, I was like, oh man, it's a lot to focus on.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we spend so much time, and I'll speak for myself. I have spent a lot of time pointing the finger at other people, especially after I spent so many years healing and became a licensed therapist. I thought, I could tell everybody else how to heal and how to do their thing. But of course, nobody likes that because then I come off across as a critic. I come across as my inner critic is talking to them because I'm somehow judging them and their inner child is being triggered by my critic. And that's a lot of what arguments are. Arguments are rarely two adults coming to the table because that's a discussion. Arguments and, full blown meltdowns that happen, those are when we have an inner critic and an inner child trying to get their needs met and really not hearing each other or listening to each other. What we need is for at least one of them to try to maintain that adult self. And if one of them can maintain the adult self, it changes the whole dynamic. And once the one person can maintain the adult, the other person is more likely to come out. And another way we can think about this is about the nervous system. So when your nervous system is dysregulated, you go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that is when you're in your inner critic or your inner child. That's when we go into these survival modes. When you're in a regulated state, you're open for connection. You are able to sleep well. You're able to digest food easily. You're able to really be curious about what's going on with the other person. Like you mentioned, your partner was able to say, hey, why didn't you tell me that? you know? And that's a curiosity. It wasn't a shaming, it wasn't like a blaming. It was a, hey, I'm kind of curious about this. That means that they were in their adult regulated state and you were able to show up as an adult and say, "Oh yeah, that was an old pattern. You know, won't do that again." But like I said, a lot of times we're dysregulated, and so there's two parts of it. When that's why I think of like the holistic approach is because we can't just kind of talk about these things like cognitively understand your inner critic, cognitively understand your inner child. Those are great. We also need to do the nervous system work paired with that to then, because when you're hijacked by your stress, your prefrontal cortex shuts down, parts of your brain shut down. And when that happens, you lose IQ points, you forget, your memory goes, so you're saying things and you don't even remember saying them. It's like when you can, like when somebody's really upset and like you don't understand what, like you sound like a 2-year old or something, you know, like obviously you're not an adult right now. It's because their brain is literally shut down. And so regulating the nervous system can really help with that.
This is amazing. All this information has been very helpful.
Good. I'm so glad.